Hey, Redemption Church, it's Pastor Matt here, and I finally have that long-awaited for building update that so many of you have been asking as far as like what's going on and when things are going to happen and what's the plan with the building and are there some hang-ups or is there things going on with the city or the builder or the whatever, and so we're finally giving you the update. So with this though, I want to give two quick kind of like trigger warnings as to this update. The first, it will not be a 3 to 5 minute update. Now, what I'm going to try to do this basically 25-minute update is to give kind of the bottom line on the front end and then give the details on the back end. So that if you're a bottom line person, you're going to be in and out. If you're a details person, you might want to go ahead and pop some popcorn, get yourself a Fresca. It'll be a little bit long because I'll have to take 5 years worth of all sorts of things and put it into 25 minutes worth of updates. So that's the one thing you need to know on the front end. The other thing you need to know on the front end is the reality that this is not necessarily the update that we were all wishing for, hoping for, praying for, but rather it's an update that has some whitewater, a little bit of chop. We've got to slow the boat, yellow lights. You pick kind of your metaphor, but it definitely has some of those things going on. So let me see if I can just start with the bottom line here at the beginning, and then I'm going to unpack all the details, hopefully answer a lot of questions that you probably will have as this is going. So hopefully I can get ahead of some of that, give you those kinds of answers to questions that I would just kind of assume a lot of people would have. And then from there, if you have further questions, you can reach out to myself or Pastor Scott or any one of the leaders. If you have ideas or thoughts, you can reach out to us as well. So let me go ahead and now put the pieces together, give you the bottom line first, and then we'll move along to the details. So back in November of 2020, we came before all of you and said, hey, we've started this process of trying to figure out how to redesign and redeploy the building down on Main Street to be everything for us on Sunday mornings and everything else. So at that point, we had a preliminary general contractor, we had a preliminary designer and architect all brought together for this idea called design build. And a design build is where you actually get the general contractor on the front end of the project. It's not like you go and you get an architect, they do the design and the plans, and then you go find your general contractors and you do bids. Rather, what we did in kind of a weird way is we vetted 4 different construction companies on the front end and landed on the one that consistently had the lowest cost for churches of all 4, the greatest aptitude for, what the project was going to be. And then we landed with them, and then they work with the architect and the designer to come up with the best set of options. And there was all sorts of positives behind that. And for us, it was positive too. So there in 2020, I think this goes back to 2019 is when we first kind of did a lot of that process, late 2019. And then in 2020, we had an online meeting where we shared with all of you that the total cost of the building was going to be $6.5 million. And we had kind of a general sketch of what that was going to look like. And then from there, we said, hey, if we're going to do this, we have to raise a decent amount of money in a short amount of time. We need the giving to go up. We need a chunk of down payment to be paid out. And so from that, we just put it in God's hands and in your minds and said, hey, if this is going to happen, then we have to raise a bunch of funds. And by God's grace and your generosity, you did that very thing. And so when we started 2020, we had $500,000 in the bank. And at that point too, the hub was paid off, the property was paid off, and so everything was paid off, and we had $500,000. Huge in and of itself. Well, then we came to you in November of 2020, told you that. By the end of 2020, so in 6 weeks, from November to December, there was a total of $1.35 million given, right? So you take that, you add it to, actually by that point in November, I think that the savings of the church had gone from $500,000 to $700,000, and then we were able to buckle together the 1.35 with that $700,000. So we had a pretty big chunk. And you'll remember back in 2021, starting in July, we did the matching fund, and you all gave $750,000, which was matched by $750,000. Take all of those numbers, put them together, and right now as a church, we have just a little shy of 3.6 million. I think it's like 3.58 right now, and I haven't seen the numbers yet for the month of July. So I know we're orbiting right around in there. And so in a very finite amount of time, a large sum of money has been given by your generosity as you felt led to really get behind this project, really just saying, hey, we believe that Redemption Church is meant to be in the community of Duvall and reach the community of Duvall. So with that number and with the previous numbers of 6.5 million, we felt pretty good. Like, hey, we have nearly half of that money. And also to kind of give you a sense of that 6.5 million that we talked about in November, some of that money was the soft costs of engineers, architects, things of that nature, the permitting process, all those things you have to do. And so technically we estimated, based on our project manager and builder and everybody else, that about $500,000 of that $6 million or $6.5 million was soft costs, right? And then of that, by the time we got to the building, we would have spent $500,000 in soft costs. And that's kind of the way it's been laying out. We've been paying all of the parties that be to do the process as it is. And so we were going into this year feeling really, really great. We've got half the money down payment. This is a hot property on 203. Any lender is going to be totally cool with wanting to do this because, again, you're putting 50% down. It's going to be a building that can be easily retrofitted into an office building. If for some unforeseen reason that, God forbid, would happen, we had to foreclose on the property or the bank had to foreclose on us, they would take control of it and be like, well, we got a property that's instantly worth way more than we invested into, and they could recoup their money, and it would be basically a safe investment. That was kind of the way we were looking at it. So we really thought that, hey, ground was going to be breaking just as soon as we were done with all the paperwork with the city and with all of the permitting process. And so that is coming to a close. The city's been great. They've been busy. They've been swamped with a lot of things, but they have a job to do, and they have to make sure everything is exactly according to code and standard, and they've been doing that. And so we're nearing the end of that process. Some of that process is probably even ended by now, and other parts are nearing their conclusion. And so that part's great. The architects are done, the engineers are done, everybody's done. And so with that, we're like, hey man, we need to get one more verification on the cost of the project. So the plans need to go back to our general contractor. And then with that number, we are approaching then a lender that we've been working with for a while. They're going to run the appraisal. We're going to see what the appraisal is, what the concrete number now of the project is, and then we'll get lending for the difference from the amount that we have, and we'll get underway. And that's where we hit the yellow lights. And we hit a string of yellow lights in this particular series of events. And so the first yellow light we hit was when everything went back to the builder sat down, and you and I all know gas has gone up, steel's gone up, lumber's gone up, everything's gone up, right? We've talked to some friends in the commercial building world, and they said just in like the last year, their projects all went up 40%. I was talking with another person that's a CEO of a company, and they're like, yeah, everything's just gone up in a pretty substantial way. And so once the builder reran the numbers, they're like, going forward in the project to build this building and finish up the other soft costs that would need to be paid out, we're looking at $7.7 million. So where we thought by this stage it would be $6 million, and we were bringing more than half to $6 million to the table. We're sitting on 3.6 right now. The cost would be 6. And we thought this can be no problem. Well, now it's jumped from the remainder being $6 million to the remainder being 7.7. And so the total project was actually 8.1 with all the soft costs figured in. We've paid out some of those soft costs, almost $400,000. So that puts the project at 7.7. So we have 3.6, it's 7.7. There's a gap there, right, of some significance. So that's one part, right, where basically, we would need, roughly another half, give or take in that, right? But I'll get into this in a second. So that was the first thing we ran into. The second thing we ran into was then the lender. And so working with the lender, we go ahead and we order an appraisal. The appraisal is not in the bank's department at all. Like we hire an independent appraiser to do the appraisal, give it to the bank. So there's no sense or kind of appearance of anybody's trying to work the numbers to make something work. And so that's just the way kind of things occur. We're thinking no problem at all, goes to the appraiser. The appraiser sends the appraisal over to the bank, and the appraiser concludes that our building, when it's complete, when it's done, everything's built, is going to be worth $4.5 million. So it's going to cost $7.7 to complete it. It's only going to be worth $4.5. And then for the bank, what the bank does is they look at that appraisal and they say, we will lend 50% of either appraised value or the cost of the project, whichever is cheaper, right? So that's the key, whatever is cheaper. So if the builder was the only one they consulted with and they said, okay, it's going to be 7.7, the bank would say, well, we'll loan 50% of 7.7. Now, that would still, put us pretty tight, but it would be kind of in that space. But when it's suddenly 4.5, the bank says, well, we're only going to loan to you 2.25, and then there's going to be fees in that and everything else. Really, it leaves us with about $2 million borrowed. We add that to the 3.6, that's 5.6, but the cost is 7.7. We're $2.1 million short of what it would take to do the project, right? So that's ultimately the gap that's important here. And so that was the second kind of big hurdle was, hey, you're short over $2 million. The third hurdle that's in there is the timeline itself. And so if you remember back in 2017, we put in our application with the city to do this project. It was stamped to be approved, to be evaluated, and that's what we've been in ever since 2017. But that was done on the same day, that approval or that reception of our application, that was done on the same day the city council voted new wetland ordinances in, to where now like the borders of wetlands in Duvall are much more expanded than they were before that ordinance was passed. How that pertains to us is that we are grandfathered in the old ordinance, but for a finite amount of time. It's not forever, it's a finite amount of time. And that time for us is June of 2023. In other words, if the project isn't underway in earnest by 2023, by June of 2023, then that ordinance does take effect for all of our property. Our building and our land next door is all inside that zone, and it is unbuildable and unchangeable at that point. So it would be frozen in stasis for the rest of time or until the ordinance was changed. Nobody sees the ordinance changing anytime soon. It was an ordinance designed to limit the growth of Duvall in a lot of different ways. And so those are our yellow lights. We only have 10 months roughly left to get the project done. We are short $2.1 million. The appraised value of the building is basically half of what it actually is going to cost in its completion to do. And we just don't, that gap needs to be addressed is kind of what it comes down to. Now, let me walk you through some of the details of all of that, and then I'll tell you what the bottom line of all of this then kind of means. And so the first detail that probably some of you are wanting to know about is, well, did you get multiple bids then from a general contractor? I mean, this general contractor is saying it's going to be this much money, but maybe we should go looking around. Maybe we'll get better bids elsewhere, and that will make a difference. Well, that's the responsible thing to do for sure. And kind of in part what we did was on the front end. We weighed a lot of builders, obviously before it was the final the final numbers of the building, but we found a number of builders and then vetted them all and really landed on this one because, again, they consistently came in underbid on their projects for churches. And so Donovan Brothers, they are an outfit that mostly does just standard commercial buildings, but once a year they do a church. And when they do a church, they try to really do it in such a way that it's a type of ministry for them. They know it's tough for churches to do this. They try to reduce costs as much as possible for churches. So even what they charge, a church is different than when they charge a commercial project. And so we knew that going in based on that. But then what we decided to do when the numbers rolled in is instead of trying to go find other general contractors, go solicit bids from them, because honestly, it took our contractor months to put this together. If we start running around knowing we have a 10-month timeline, we're just going to eat up a lot of time hoping to find something that may not be what we're hoping for, right? We might get bids that are higher or the same, and it doesn't really help. So instead what we did is we hired an independent firm to come in, look at the project. They actually bid out the project, not as a builder, but they bid out the project just as an independent agency that can do that kind of thing. And then they compare what they've come to the conclusion on with what our builders come to the conclusion on. And then they let us know, hey, your builder is overcharging, or this is right, or this is wrong, or whatever else. And so it's almost like doing an audit to the bid of our contractor. And when they did that, they came back to us and said, our numbers were higher than your contractor. So their conclusion was, your contractor is working way over time to make this project work for you. And that is a blessing. You need to see that they are doing something that most contractors probably wouldn't do. So do we go out and solicit bids and try to find a better number? Well, based on that information, we discovered we have probably the best number that's going to come our way. Things are just expensive right now. They're incredibly expensive. That's what this reflects. But doing our due diligence, that was the conclusion we came to. So that was the first thing. Second thing, you may say, well, you got a terrible appraisal. How did we get such a terrible appraisal? Well, part of that is we think it's a terrible appraisal. So what the appraiser did is, instead of looking at our project and saying, wow, this building is way more of a office space, because if you look at our plans, it looks way more like an office building down on 203 than it looks like a church. If the bank needed to take possession of it, it could be easily redeployed as an office building, and therefore we felt it should have been appraised more as a community center or some kind of commercial space of that nature. But the appraiser instead decided to land on the fact that no, this is a church, and we're going to appraise it as a church, and therefore we're not going to pull comps of commercial buildings on the east metro side of the greater Seattle area. We're going to pull comps of churches only that have sold all over the Puget Sound. So it was one in Federal Way, one in Everett, one in Auburn, different things like that. And part of the problem there is churches, most of them look just like a church. And if it looks just like a church and you resell a church, you're pretty much just selling it to another church. In other words, there's not a hot market for church buildings. And so they're always going to be of lower value. And then you're not factoring in the limitations of how much property is on Main Street in Duvall. You're not factoring in the property values of Duvall over a Federal Way or some of these other areas. And so we ended up with such a poor appraisal because they appraised what we're doing as just another church, and that didn't reflect the realities of what things are. And so in talking to other professionals, we're actually having a person right now run a separate appraisal, not for the lender, just for our own peace of mind based on some options I'll talk about in a minute. So they're going to run that, but we're certain, even when we went to our builder and our architect, they were all completely shocked by what the appraisal was, because they're like, that's not even how this normally goes down. Appraisals done by banks and the builder's numbers are usually pretty in concert when it comes to construction loans in particular. But for our lender, the game's kind of over. They go, we're not going to go ask for a second appraisal because it was what it was. We're willing to lend you $2 million or $2.25 million, but no more than that. And again, after fees, you'll have $2 million. You're still short $2.1 million. You're going to have to solve that problem on your own, kind of thing. So from that, we said, okay, we're going to go to a different lender. And so right now we're in the process of working with the Assemblies of God. They actually have a lending arm. They're looking over our material as well, and they're trying to weigh out what's doable, the cost of the project, everything else. And they've been super quick, super thoughtful, great communication. They're moving as fast as they can. But in that, they also have hesitation pretty much for this a similar reason of the bank. They haven't asked for the appraisal side of it, but they're looking at our giving records. They are looking at the amount of money we have so far. They're looking at the amount of money that is still needed, because if they became the primary lender at this point, they're covering the entire gap between 3.6 million and 7.7, right? So that's a pretty hefty number right there. And so in light of that, like basically 4.1 million, they're like that's a sizable enough chunk that you guys maybe need to make some adjustments. You probably need to raise some more money, and you need to increase your monthly giving. And we've been talking about that throughout the entire year, that we really needed to be hitting 90,000. We've been pretty much hitting 70,000. That all gets factored in. And I kind of mentioned that, I think, a few months back on some of the Sunday mornings about, hey, the lenders are going to look at these these monthly income amounts. And that's kind of what's now happening with the Assemblies of God. We're waiting to hear kind of a final verdict, but we sense, based on what they're communicating to us, that, hey, we need to close this gap up in some way, right? So to go from 3.6 to 7.7, that 4.1 million is just too big based on our monthly giving and other things. We're going to have to, again, seal that up, minimize the distance to build the lending bridge at that point. And so that's kind of what's going on there as well. So getting another appraisal, got a real difficult appraisal based on that. The lender that we currently were working with was like, and honestly, unless we get an appraisal from another lender outside of, like, after Assemblies of God, we might even try to talk to a third lender. But even in that, it's kind of like, we're going to spend another $10,000 on an appraisal. I mean, how many 10,000s do you drop on appraisals hoping the appraisal is just higher? We totally agreed the appraisal we got did not reflect reality. And we therefore we are soliciting an independent appraisal, not for the sake of giving to a lender. The lender is going to have to work with their own appraisal company. But we're doing it even for our own due diligence in the event that anybody's willing to engage in kind of any private lending, or if we were to go down a bond initiative road or something of that nature, we could say, hey, listen, we know the building is now worth X. Like, there was that first appraisal, it was bad. This new appraisal, realistically, everybody we've talked to, the appraisal should land somewhere in the mid to high $7 million range as it is based on what this building is, based on where it's at. And so we want to be able to have an appraisal in hand that, again, we're not trying to change the numbers or force the numbers up or anything else, just one that's more authentic to our space, right? All the way around, like to find that and have that in the event of some kind of other option on the lending front. So again, we're kind of looking at all of that, right? But that's all the moving pieces that are there for us right now. That's all the stuff that we're dealing with. And so I'm hoping that in this kind of recap of process, you can understand the due diligence that's been in, the things that look like green lights all the way through. Now we've hit these yellow lights, and now we're working through what does that mean. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes things that are going on. I think probably in the next week or two, we're going to hear the final verdict from the Assemblies of God, but kind of already looking at all of the different data points. Here is our ultimate, what would have to kind of happen in the next 10 months. It pretty much comes down to, no matter how we slice it, we need to raise, I'm going to say $2.1 million in 10 months. That would be the simplest format. I know there's a lot of ways that we could look at this differently and everything else. If we had a better appraisal and then the lender would lend on 50%, and if we can get a better appraisal, we can get a better, all those, there's all kinds of ways that we could look at this. But if we just talked about what's a concrete action plan that we need to engage in over the next 10 months, $2.1 million is the action plan. That's what we need to raise. And part of that is not just simply like, oh, then we can get a lender that can lend the difference. Part of that is also, we don't want to return to the days of having a mortgage where the monthly payment is half of the total operating budget of the church, right? In other words, we don't want to be straddled and saddled with debt. We don't want to do that. Now, like there is that reality that says, hey, but if our property is worthless in 10 months, wouldn't it be at least worth it to somehow get in the door, get the project underway? And I go, yeah, we actually agree that getting the project underway and doing whatever we can to do that before that window closes is critical. But just even in the reality of lenders, they're all looking, saying, we're not going to lend you that much. You have to close this gap if you're going to get some lending from us. And so that's really the gap we need to close. So the target is $2.1 million we need to raise between now and I say June of 2023, but I'll just be really clear with you. That would really need to be more like March or April, because it's not like, oh, we got all the money and then everybody can launch the next day. I mean, the builder has to have guarantees that we're actually going to have the money so they can put their assets in place to get the project underway. It would really have to be underway pretty firmly behind the scenes before June, so that when the city looks, they're like, okay, this project is really happening, and therefore they've got 12 months to complete it. And if it's not completed by then, they get another 6-month extension. That's kind of the way that model works. So we have a lot of money to raise in a short amount of time. That's probably the simplest fact of all of it, all right? And so that is the new target. And if you would have asked me a year and a half ago, would we be sitting on 3.6 million? I would have said no. If you would have asked me if we were going to raise, 1.5 million in 5 months, I would say no. If you were to ask me if we were going to raise 1.35 million in 6 weeks, I would have said no. And so do I think 2.1 is impossible? No. I mean, if anything, our whole attitude has been, we're going to keep walking through the doors until there's no more doors to walk through. And so I'm actually in an optimistic space that says, hey, I believe this can still happen. I really believe that somehow God has paved the way all the way through, and that's going to be the same thing now. We just all have to be prayerful, mindful, charitable, and go, okay, if we believe in this project, then these are the things that's going to take to see this project come to completion in our community, right? So I think it's that simple. Now, if we had an inexhaustible timeline, would we just say, hey, let's just keep saving, let's be patient, we know it's going to take a while, but that's understandable? We would totally do that. It's really that 10-month timeline that really is the final pressing point, where we know that, hey, come next summer, there's just no options going forward, right? And, in that, I know some of you may say, well, what if we just began the project and then it was phased, right? Because that's been a question. Could we build just the shell, don't do the insides, at least it's there, and then that's good enough for the city to say you built it, and then we can add the guts of it later and all the details, and therefore maybe we're more in striking distance. Well, the challenge there is that the bulk of the cost of the building is, in fact, that idea of the shell. So there's all sorts of unique engineering that has to happen with our property. There's all sorts of, site development that is pretty costly for the site we're on. And so even if we said, hey, we just want the parking in, the lighting outside, and the shell of the building, Well, that's still pressing like 85% of the cost. Like, it's just, that's the majority of what it's going to take to do the building. The insides are not nearly as bad as the overall structure and engineering that makes up the entire campus, if you will. And so a phased idea just doesn't save us enough. And none of the lenders want to lend to something that's phased. In other words, they're like, wait, so we're not going to have a finished product, but we're going to give you $2 million. You're going to use your $3.6 million for, like a $5.6 million into the investment. But in the end, it's not, we still have to dump more money just to make it a resellable space. And they're like, no, we don't want to do that. So this is why, again, really our best option is to see that difference raised. Now, with that, we are open to other thoughts or other insights. We've kind of hit a lot of trees to see what's going to fall out and everything else. And, we're willing to still solicit those things. So if somebody says, hey, listen, I have the means and I'm willing to do a private loan, and even the agreement of that loan would be as such that we could well manage it, and they would be, again, giving a little bit of an elongated lending time. We're open to those things. We're open to a lot of things. Honestly, like I said, a bond program, we'd be open to a bond program. That has different challenges to it based on the timeline of trying to spin one up and make sure you have enough resources before that date next year kind of hits. But we're open, right? So you are free to come and talk to us. You're free to share ideas, but you get a sense of what we're really looking at here. And that's where in this update video, I wanted to keep it as simplified as possible, just to say, okay, here's our bottom line. It's really going to take $2.1 million. It's really going to need to be in place by this spring of 2023, because the timeline is an absolute dead date of June of 2023. And the facts are, friends. These are kind of the facts that we're working with right now. Still things that are kind of getting tied up. And so as soon as we have that information, as far as we hear from the Assemblies of God, as soon as we get a secondary appraisal, things of that nature. And the appraisal we're getting, by the way, it's somebody that does appraisals, but it's doing it in a little bit more of a pro bono way, because we didn't want to spend another $10,000 on another appraisal. We wanted to see if we could find somebody that was willing to do it and at least give us a sense of, are we accurate about the one that we got that we thought was so off center? Or is this in fact just reality and we have to absorb that? So we'll keep you filled in on all of that too. But I wanted to be able to share with you. I've been wanting to do this for like the last week, actually. We were hoping we were going to get more information from the Assemblies of God and I could put it all together then. And then it got there was more data they needed from us. And yet in asking for more data, it revealed where their headspace is. And what I'm sharing with you, I think is what their headspace is. So anyway, here's what I know. I love you guys. Here's what else I know. I know that we have been walking through doors for years that I didn't think the doors would be open to walk through. I believe those doors are still going to be open, but it's going to take your prayers. It's going to take your patience. It's going to take your participation. It's going to take another mammoth movement to see this come into being. But we've been watching them for our entire life as a church, and I believe we're poised for that again. I mean, even going through COVID, and to see, just all the things that happened in the positive for us, where other churches were shutting down and laying off staff and everything else. Like, it's been a huge blessing. And so I don't know fully what God has in store for us, but I know God is walking with us in the process. And so you're in the know now. I'm in the know now. We know how to pray now. We know how to engage now. And again, if you have any thoughts, insights, solutions of a tangible, concrete nature, hey, let us know. If you have further questions, let us know. I know at this point the video is probably 30 minutes and I couldn't cover everything, but again, trying to take years of a process and put it into minutes of revelation, kind of tough, right? So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you're not deeply discouraged, but you're challenged. And from that, you're going to be moved to pray. So we love you guys so much, and just waiting to see what God's going to do. So you guys have, a great day. I know it's blazing hot outside, everything else, but just redeem the day. Remember, life is better with Jesus. No matter how we do it and how we slice it, life is always better with him. And man, I am sure grateful to be running around with you.